Hello everybody, Paul Laski here with Icon Collective, and today I want to go over something very special with you guys. We're going to talk a little bit about synthesis today, and I want to synthesize a specific type of sound, and that sound is the very famous TB-303 acid bass style sound. Now, the TB-303 is a much sought after piece of gear. It's very hard to find nowadays, and if you can find it, it's extremely expensive, because they've been discontinued for years and years now, but they were huge in the 80s and early 90s and really sort of were responsible for the development of acid house and techno music. And it's funny because we're hearing a lot of TB-303 sounds in a lot of modern tracks today. So I want to show you guys how you can use any subtractive synth to get a similar sound to the TB-303 acid sound. We'll talk about some of the principles about the foundation of the synth and what you need to do to recreate that sound. And we'll also come up with a cool bass sequence along the way. So let's go ahead and get started. So for this project, I'm going to actually be using a Max for Live synthesizer. It's a Max instrument. It's free for those of you who have Max for Live. If any of you have Ableton Live Suite, you have access to Max for Live for free. But this synth is available on ableton.com in the Live Pack section. And it's part of a pack called Classic Synths, and the synth is called cat.august. And I'm going to use this on this bass track that I've set up. And the reason I'm using this synth is because it's a very no-nonsense kind of a synth. There are no menus to navigate through. There are no windows to get lost in. Everything is just right here on the interface. So let's go ahead and get started making the sound. So there's my basic sound. I also, just to be safe, I want to grab a limiter from my audio effects section of the browser and put it after the synth because it tends to run a little bit hot and I just don't want any clipping to occur. So let's just put that right after the synth. We can leave it at its default settings. And let's start to make the sound. Now, a couple important things to keep in mind when you're talking about a TB-303. First off, the only waveforms available to you on a TB-303's oscillator section were a square wave and a sawtooth wave. And that's why this is another great reason why I chose this synth for this particular sound, because we only have a square wave available to us on oscillator 1, and oscillator 2 is switchable between a saw wave and a noise wave. I'm going to adjust the mix, or actually I'll leave the mix as it is all the way to the left. That means I'm only going to hear oscillator 1, which is a square wave. And let's go down a couple of octaves on my keyboard to get more of a bass tone. So we have a square wave. The next thing we're going to need to do is address the filter. You can see that there is only a low-pass filter in this particular synth, and that's good because the TB-303 only had a low-pass filter as well. So you can switch it between a low-pass 12 and a low-pass 24 mode, and this has to do with the steepness of the slope at the cutoff frequency. I'm going to stick with 12 for right now, give myself a little bit more of a gradual slope rather than a steeper slope that I would get with the LP24. So let's stick with the LP12. And let's set the cutoff relatively low. I also want to turn the resonance up because a lot of that squelchy sound that you get from the TB-303 is from the resonance dial. So after addressing the cutoff and the resonance, let's move down to the filter envelope. And what we want to do here, because the filter envelope is really what's going to sculpt the sound here, what we want to do is bring the sustain level down. We can keep the attack as it is at 0. Let's bring the sustain down because the sustain is a secondary level that the cutoff is going to fall to. So what we're telling the filter envelope to do right now is raise the cutoff frequency and then drop it down to a frequency specified by the sustain level. So I want that to be relatively low. The amount that I tell the cutoff to jump up is dictated by this dial here labeled EG, or envelope generator. This is how much depth or how much is this filter envelope going to control the cutoff. So if I wanted to jump the cutoff up more, I want to increase this value. And you can hear the sound as it sort of falls to that lower cutoff setting over time. And that amount of time is dictated by the decay level here. If I want it to happen very quickly, a short decay. I also want to go over here to the amplifier envelope, amp EG, and I just want to increase the attack a slight bit, just soften it up a little bit. And I also want to increase the release time so that when I let go of the key, the sound doesn't just cut off so instantaneously. And let's match the release time on the filter envelope to the release time on the amp envelope as well. And what I also want to be able to do, we've got sort of the core of the sound down, but I want to be able to tweak it in real time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this instrument and I'm going to press Command G on my keyboard. That's going to group it into an instrument rack. And if I open up the macro controls by clicking this button here, let's macro map a couple of key controls so that we can tweak the sound as my sequence plays back. So let's engage map mode. And a few of the parameters that we definitely want to have control over, things that you had full control over when using a 303, is the cutoff dial. So let's map that to macro 1. The resonance, let's map it to macro 2. And you can see how the names of the macro controls automatically rename themselves. I also definitely want control over how much the envelope, the filter envelope, is affecting that cutoff. So let's map that to macro 3. And let's also map the decay time, how long it takes to sweep that cutoff frequency back down. Let's map that to macro 4. Now we can turn off map mode. And I'm going to actually rename this. It just gave me the letter D here. I want to rename that so I know that's decay. So let me click on it and press Command R. I'm just going to type in decay. And now you can see that it's actually zeroed out all of my settings here. So let's set these back roughly to where I had them. Turn the EG up a bit, the decay time up a bit. There we go. And let's play my drums back. I've got some drums on track 1. Close up my browser. I've actually already programmed in a quick sequence of 16th notes that we can play back to trigger the 303. And now that I've macro mapped these controls, you can start to tweak the sound in real time. And these are awesome controls to MIDI map also. Get some real-time, hands-on control of your 303 sound. And if you happen to be using the Cat August synth, it's got a really awesome sounding built-in chorus effect. Gonna widen your sound right up. And I could honestly sit here and do this all day and come up with a 12 or 13-minute techno track for you all, but fortunately we just don't have that kind of time. But that is the essence of the sound right there. So again, I used a square wave. We're using a low-pass filter, and we manipulated the cutoff, the resonance, the envelope amount, how much is the filter envelope controlling the filter, and then we manipulated a couple of the settings on the filter envelope as well as the amplifier envelope. And I'm using this Cat August synth, but you can really use this on any subtractive synthesizer that gives you a sawtooth wave or a square wave as an oscillator choice, which is just about every subtractive synth I think I've ever worked with. So again, if you want to, you can adjust the mix down here if you want to hear what it sounds like with more of a sawtooth wave or a blend of the two. I tend to go for the square wave though, that's just me. Cool, so that's how you synthesize a basic TB-303 acid bass style sound. Again, you can do this with just about any subtractive synthesizer you have available to you. And try it out with a few different synths because every synth is going to have its own special character, its own special tonality to it. So have fun with this, enjoy it, and thanks for watching.